Thank you, Helga. Um, you already know my name and a little bit of my background. I will try to share the screen and represent a little bit of a talk on the work on biodiverse business sites that I've been working on the last perhaps 20 years. So let me share the screen. I have to do this. Yes, there I am. So this is the title: Urban Industrial Areas as Ecological Potential. Perhaps, yes. First, a little bit about who I am and how I've been involved in this topic. So I did a PhD research already some years ago on biodiversity conservation at business sites. I did this, started in 2004. And by the time it was a topic, at least in Europe, which was not that known. And I wrote together with some colleagues in Wageningen and other scientists, I wrote some papers about it, trying to explore what is the added value of a business site currently and in potential for biodiversity conservation and biodiversity experience. But as I work at one of the applied research institutes in Wageningen, I'm really interested not only in the scientific part, but also how to make this to reality, to apply this knowledge to the reality of business sites in the Netherlands and beyond. So I also was involved in some publications and some media attention on this topic. So this is what I would like to do. I really appreciate trying to link the scientific knowledge with the practical situation. So today's presentation will have this setup. I will start to talk a little bit about the general aspects regarding biodiversity at business sites. So we have a kind of global knowledge on this, kind of basic knowledge. And then I will go into some of the PhD research, which is for example, on the current value of business sites for biodiversity, and that I will explain by using breeding bird data. Then I will dig into the more temporary nature that can live at business sites. I will do this based on amphibians, and also about the urban green that is existing already there at the business site, but can provide all kinds of habitat opportunities for wildlife. And in this case, I will present the study we did on butterflies. So this is, let's say, a little bit about the scientific part of it. And then I'll will tell a little bit about some front-runner cases in the Netherlands in making business sites more biodiverse and greener. And then zoom out a little bit and go to some international practices. And I will end up with, let's say, how we try to upscale this knowledge in the Netherlands, and also perhaps things that can be used outside the Netherlands as well. So this was more or less the setup. So first, let's talk about business sites. In this picture, it's emphasized a little bit. In reality, they are a little bit smaller, but at least you can see that they are in the Netherlands. They are everywhere, even on the islands. And you could even hide the white part and then still see where the Netherlands is located. And altogether, we have more than 3,500 of those business sites. And you all know perhaps that these are really inspiring locations where it will be hard to find some nature. One of the things, if we talk about the potential of these sites for biodiversity conservation, is to look at their location, and they are everywhere. And if we combine their location with the location of what we call the ecological main structure in the Netherlands, you will find many places where the business site and the ecological main structure are neighbors, where they are really adjacent to each other, or at least on a very close proximity. And so these areas, those business sites, they have purely due to their location, they have a potential to contribute to nature, as they are so close often to the natural environment. And this is the case for 1 out of 6 business sites. And you can see it's the red spots on the map where they are linked together. If you look to the design of a business site, and let's say in general, then there is a little bit less potential for nature. As a design for business site means that you have a road, and then you have the places where the businesses can establish themselves. And in the end, it's very effectively used all space. And then people think, well, perhaps it's a little bit not so nice to work here. So they put on a little bit of urban green, and that's about it. So that's the traditional business site design in conceptual way, but it's often the case in reality. And if we look to those business sites, we can see and we can really recognize where there are business sites in the urban landscape. If you see this picture, and then I try to make all the vegetation, I will make it red by using an infrared picture. You can see that, so the red is are the city trees and the city forest and the parks and things like that, and the gardens. You can really identify the business site, and this is the area with the least urban green. So you can see the sporting fields, you can see the streets with the verges full of urban green. Even on the bottom, you can see the gardens of in the neighborhoods. But at the business site itself, it's really a lack of urban green there. So when I started back in 2004, I was asked by my colleague ecologist at the Institute what I was doing with business sites. And I told them that I'm quite an optimist. And being an optimist, you can identify opportunities for wildlife everywhere. And you can see that there is, even in those places, is a little bit of green. But you have to look very carefully sometimes. If I try to look what is the potential that the business sites can offer, and what I studied in my PhD, I look to what a business site can be on the edge of a city, as most of them are located on the edge of cities, between the city and the rural area. And you could say it could offer, could make a contribution to the quality of work. So this is one thing that a greener business site could do. It could also, with the right urban green, it could make a contribution to the biodiversity conservation in rural areas. And even it could contribute to the quality of life in the city itself. So this is what I explored in my PhD, and I will go into 2 or 3 of my detailed studies. So first one is on the current value of business sites, and we used a lot of the ecological data in the Netherlands is made on birds, on breeding birds especially. And when we compare the data from urban areas, we figured out that there is less green and blue in business sites, and that means there are also lower densities of breeding birds at business sites if we compare them to residential areas and to urban parks. And we look to the breeding birds communities there. However, some birds really like the business site. They like the type of vegetation. Often it's more accidental. It's not meant to be there for wildlife. but it's used by the birds as, for example, the common linnet. And also some of the coastal birds, they do live at business sites, and they have the roofs with the gravel. They look a little bit lookalikes like a part of the beach. It's hard for foxes to enter the roof, although if I go back here, you can see there's also some roofs there. And this ecologist from Amsterdam told me that one day he found a fox even trying to climb the stairs to the roofs to go for the eggs of the breeding birds on the roof of those terminals. So also foxes are opportunistic and trying to figure out, but for most of the coastal birds, it could be a place to live. So there is some actual value of business sites for wildlife, but it is limited, and it is specific for specific animals and plants, of course. And one of the main triggers for the current biodiversity is the way the land is used and the dynamics of the land use. So you can see here there's often some under construction type of work going on, and it means that it will take some time before the actual building will start, and that sometimes could mean years. Yeah, in some examples, it's 5 to 10 years that an area is prepared for building, but it's left, and only years later it will be built up. And some of the animals in the Netherlands, they really like that type of situation. We call them pioneering species in the Netherlands, which is an area with a lot of rivers and sea. They really are used to have those temporary areas. We don't have them that many these days, as we have dikes and all other kinds of barriers to limit the dynamics of the land use. But here we create certain land use dynamics due to the fact that we are developing business sites, and sometimes it takes quite some time. And some of those plants and animals are endangered and well protected. And one of those species we studied in the port of Antwerp in Belgium, and this is the nettercheck toad. It's really a pioneer species. They really like situations with a limited amount of vegetation, sandy soils where they can dig into a little bit of water. That's enough for this pioneering species. They also live in dune areas and other places. And what we find out is that in the port of Antwerp, and it's also in other places, you can see there are different parcels for different companies. And then you see the road, and sometimes, some of those parcels are vacant. They are not used, and it means that they are well prepared for building. That it's a sandy soil, a little bit of rain, a little bit of spontaneous vegetation, and then those nice creatures will show up. And as they are endangered but also protected by European law, as a business site organization and as a company, you have quite some issues if you want to try to build there. And this is also was the case in the port of Antwerp. So they asked us, what can we do with this? Because we have to deal with those nettercheck toads, we have to deal with the companies, and how can we balance that? And what you see is that you not only have the parcels, but also you have what we call the business site casco, the terrain surrounding the parcels. And here it's often lawn and a traditional type of urban green. And we figured out if you want to have a population of nettercheck toads that is not depending on the dynamics of one parcel, you have to make this casco turn it into what we call an inhabited backbone, an area which provides lots of opportunities for those nettercheck toads. And so whether this parcel will be built up or not is not having a large impact on the overall population. And so this means that certain areas of the port of Antwerp should be, that's what we proposed, should be transformed into more spontaneous vegetation and pioneering environments for nature check toads. And that's what we proposed and also put in a scientific paper. And this is also what the Port of Antwerp have adopted, because they see that by doing that, they have no problems anymore with legislation, European legislation. They can offer the nature check toad a good habitat, but also they can offer the companies a good place to establish themselves. So this is a way, if there's sufficient room, of course, to deal with both the dynamic species and the business opportunities. One of the other things that I studied in my PhD is can the more official urban green at business sites provides opportunities for red list species. So also the nature check toad is a red list species, but that is more linked with the temporary nature. But also if we talk about, let's say, the formal urban green, the lawns and the other parts, can we do something there to promote wildlife? And for that reason, we looked into butterflies that are linked with heathland and grassland type of vegetation. You probably don't know the scientific names, but here at least you see some of the species and as a picture. And those are specialist species. They really have high standards in terms of their habitat conditions. But those are conditions that you could develop at the business site. And in a study where we work together with the butterfly conservation in the Netherlands, they have lots of data on the butterfly distribution of those and other species. We figured out, could it be that that business sites can offer something to vulnerable populations of these butterfly species? And here you see the types of habitat that are already there or can be perhaps transformed into more butterfly habitat that has the potential to support butterfly populations. So I've already showed that there are all kinds of opportunities where the business sites and the natural areas are close together. And if we look to the business site distribution and we compare it to the distribution of those butterfly species, as we have quite some observations of those species in the Netherlands, so we have quite a good idea where they are located. You can see that in certain locations, certain species have small populations, quite isolated, easy to get extinct, and perhaps what a business site, urban green, could support those populations. So here you see the business sites, there you see some of the isolated and quite vulnerable populations of this butterfly species, the brown argus, and is there a link? So the overall idea is that we try to figure out where are those vulnerable populations, so not the large ones, which often are in the dunes or other areas, because they are already quite stable. Also not the more incidental observations of one or two species, one or two individuals that were seen, but that's about it. But more, let's say, the low numbers, the 5 to 10, 15 individuals that were seen over the years at a certain location. Low numbers means that a high chance of extinction, and can we support them by doing something at the business site? So if we have the business site, we know where the business site is. We also know where the observations were made. What would happen if we, and we also know about the percentage of urban green at the business site. And we figured out what would happen if we transform those urban green patches at the business site into butterfly habitat, and we can make this meta population more viable. So, and this is what we do on existing urban green. So it's not extra additional urban green at the business site, because it's often hard to get established, but transforming the existing urban green. And here you see Amsterdam, the city of Amsterdam. In dark gray, you see the port area and also the port of IJmuiden. So two large industrial areas, some other industrial areas in dark gray. And the squares, that's the distribution of one of those butterfly species. You can see that in some cases they are close to each other. So we made an analysis for the whole of the Netherlands for all those species and all those business sites. And then we came up with this results. And not every species is really supported by the idea that we could make a butterfly habitat at business sites, but some of those species are. For example, the large kipper, we figured out that for populations that we consider vulnerable, 1 out of 4, 25%, could be supported by transforming the urban green at the neighboring business site into a butterfly habitat. So that's quite a lot. And for the brown arcus, it's even 1 out of 3. So some others, there's little impact, but these are species that can have quite where this transformation into a butterfly habitat can have quite an impact. So it's on a national scale. It's analyzed, studied what let's say biodiversity conservation and transformation of existing urban green could meant in terms of supporting wetland species. And here you see in Belgium a company which is not the type of lawn that you see in the front, but this company has quite some urban green and already is working in the terms of urban green maintenance and management to make it more interesting for the butterflies. So where we studied it in theory, in terms of data analysis, they already practice it in current situation. So it's both theory and practice, which is nice. I now will go to a couple of situations in the Netherlands, more on the practical side. Here we have a biomass company which want to make an extension in this area, but it was their own land. They already bought it earlier, but during and they left it alone for several years. And during that time, this water body became an ecological corridor. And by the time that they thought, well, we're gonna start to develop this part of our terrain, some of the conservation NGOs said, well, that's a problem because then perhaps there will be an impact on the ecology and on the ecological corridor which is located there. So it took some time and some good talks, but in the end, this company decided to do something for nature, especially at the end, close to the ecological corridor. They really build up for swifts. They build up a wall that could be a breeding location, and it was so. This is in Dutch, but the interesting fact is that they made this, and within 24 hours, it was used by the swifts, by the birds. So it's really thankful to do something for wildlife. If you can see the result in an instant. And these days, this company is telling other companies and other neighbors what they do for wildlife. So it could become a legal issue early on, but they made something out of it, and now it's supporting their story. So I think it's an interesting example. I think it's about 10 years old or so. It's interesting to see how a company can make a contribution, and it's really it's really working in this case. I was involved as an expert, you could say, in several cases, and I will tell you a little bit about it. Some are more office sites, some are more ports, some more industrial or logistics. So so this is a location where an outdated office location has to be replaced by a new building, and you can already see the new building on this visual, and you can imagine, why should an ecologist be involved in this case? But if you then take out the black, you can see that it's in the city of Groningen in the north of the Netherlands. It's next to an urban forest with quite a lot of interesting species there. And so, yeah, there was a lot of rumor while making this this building. What can we do, and will there not be an impact on the wildlife there? And what can we do to support the wildlife? So yeah, it's interesting to see. So this is the visual from another point of view, and there were several ideas adopted in the design. One is that the urban green, which is now still looking as a nice picture, but it's really tuned to also have a biodiversity and make a contribution to biodiversity, to pollinators, to birds and other things, and also ensure that the trees already at the property, and also some additional trees can act as a bed corridor throughout the whole area. So it connects the urban forest via this office site to other parts of the city and rural surroundings. And then also we figured out that within the building there could be a place also for the bats to live. And so they designed a specific building at the site of the urban forest that has access for bats, and could by doing so could support some of the bat species, not all species want to live in buildings, but some of them could do so, and thereby it has an additional opportunity for the wildlife. So this was, let's say, I think this was 15 years ago or so. It was the start of how to make kind of nature inclusive buildings. In the Netherlands, we are making more progress with this recently. Another example that I would like to show you is that what happens due to the fact that those business sites are really very effectively managed in terms of the spatial use, is that they get outdated quite fast. If some companies leave the area, or it doesn't look that nice anymore, there is no really spatial quality. And so every 20, 30, 40 years, there is a new renovation needed to ensure that the business site will still function. And this also provides opportunities to do something for wildlife. And so they start to work on the sewer system, or to the mobility options, the whole road infrastructure. And by doing so, they also get in touch with them. So this is the municipality and other public authorities. And by doing so, they also get in touch with the businesses and try to convince them to do also something for the quality of the area. And one of this was near Amsterdam. One of the larger companies at the business site at Zaandam, it's called Eurocall. They have this location, and if you see this location, you can see it's really gray. There's a lack of urban green. The only type of urban green you really can see is what I call the shame green, the type of green you put on the edge to ensure that people who pass by car or so, that they don't look to those ugly buildings. So it's really, it's not really working. And I was asked by one of the managers of this company to visit their company, their terrain, and figure out if there would be any opportunities to do something with urban green. And I found tens of opportunities, but one of the nicest was this idea. this was the location. It's really not very inviting. It's close to the main entrance of the company. It's also near the company restaurant, and it's near the headquarters, the building, the main building, where they also invite their clients to visit the company. And these 15, 20 cars, if we go back to the picture, you can see on the right, you can also see there is quite a larger parking area there, and there's a small one here. So those cars can quite easily park at another location at the same. So that's what I proposed. I say, well, this is an excellent area to do something with urban green, and also something with wildlife. It's not only it's a nice strategic location at the site, but also it's focused on the south and on the sun, and from the north or from the west, where we normally in the Netherlands get the wind, it's blocked by the buildings. So it could be a really nice place. And if you want to sell this to a company, you have to identify the opportunities, to envision them, and seduce them with a nice narrative, with a nice story. So I work together with a landscaping firm, and we try to make it a different look and different way of functioning, and make it quite appealing for them to do that. And also told them what the cost would be like, and all the things. And they really, they really liked it. So they start to turn over this place and really remove the concrete and the other parts. And now it's turned into a kind of lush lunch garden with some additional value for biodiversity, for flowering, for insects and nectar searching insects and things like that, but also to experience the wildlife. And it's a small example. It's not that big. It's probably also not have an enormous impact on wildlife, but it shows that in such a very concrete situation, with a good narrative, with a good story, you can make a difference. And if you can do it here, you can also do it in many other places. So over the years, I talked with many entrepreneurs, and it took some time before I really got before I figured out how they work and how they think. And what you often see if you tell a story, you can talk about biodiversity and about climate adaptation and health and other things that are important, but they, as an entrepreneur, often they think, what's in for me? And if they don't see that, they are not interested. So over the years, I learned how to communicate in a different way. And I did so with several meetings with entrepreneurs. I started from their perspective, what they could learn from it, and also why it's important for their companies. And one of the things is that make that, for example, in the Eindhoven, the city where I live myself in the Netherlands, they really got the point in the development of a new area, business site area. They first thought about, let's say, a traditional business site, and when I told them about what the advantages, the benefits could be from more urban green, and also that some of their competitors in other countries already are doing this, they really got the idea and asked or proposed to come up with a more urban business site. And this is these days this is developed, and it's interesting to see how you get how you can change the perspective of an entrepreneur at the moment they see what's in for them. I also worked with some specific companies, and one of those is the Heineken brewery, and one of the larger beer brands in the world. And as all the global players, they are really looking into sustainability, and they have their own aims and their own roadmaps in terms of sustainability. And about 10 years ago, I was asked by them to come to their brewery and to figure out, they have a large brewery in the south of South Holland, one of the provinces in the Netherlands. Has already quite a lot of urban green, but traditional urban green lawns with trees, and that's about it, and some water bodies. And they said, what can we do here in terms of making contribution to biodiversity conservation? Because we would like, in terms of sustainability goals, we also would like to do something here. And well, I already saw the opportunities in this other business side with a lot of concrete. Of course, I can see them here. And I figured out several options which were more linked with the surrounding areas, or which were more linked with the specifics of a business site. And in the end, I said, well, I think for you as a company, as you don't want to attract many very well protected species, but you really want to have an impact on species that have a narrative. Doing something for pollinators could make a really you have several hectares of land of urban green that you can make a kind of hotspot for the pollinator, and the pollinators linked to your industry and to food production, and it's also something that is demanded in this region. So we made a kind of analysis where we figured out the size of the urban green areas, the opportunities to transform it into more pollinator friendly habitats. And yeah, we did some soil research, some other studies. And yeah, back so about 10 years ago, it looked like this. You can see the main building, also an office building on the upper picture, and then on the picture on the bottom, this is an area where visitors are invited to visit the brewery and the main the headquarters there. And it looked like this, and it is green but not inspiring. And we made an effort, and about a year later, it looked like this. It was much transformed into a kind of bee heaven, you could say. And this was done by putting seed in there, which is, let's say, a little bit more expensive than transform it in terms of other grassland management. So it was only done at certain parts, which is in the upper part where you see the red circle. That's where the managers, the CEOs of the Heineken were located, so they can look out of the window and directly see the result of this biodiversity action. And here you can see the building, which is where all the visitors to Heineken are welcomed, and they also can directly experience the more biodiverse urban green. So these were two strategic locations where we put in some more efforts to make it look nice and also biodiverse quite rapidly. Other parts were more transformed during grassland management over the years, and during some studies of the pollinators, they figured out that there are already some of the rare species found at the Heineken brewery. So it's interesting to see that with an idea, you can make a reality change. And these days, you can, in the red circle, there's the Heineken brewery. There's a whole regional approach in terms of making kind of pollinator network in the region. And those areas are public spaces from municipalities or for farmers. And this Heineken brewery location is really acting as an example. So the industry is being the example for the other players to turn their areas also into more pollinator friendly areas. So that was interesting to see. Adjacent to Heineken, there's a more traditional business site with small and medium-sized enterprises. It's called the Grote Polder. And also those entrepreneurs were inspired by the Heineken, but had a totally different context, totally different situation. So But the municipality also thought it would be great to do something with the biodiversity. So in the end, there were also meetings with the entrepreneurs there, and landscape architect made the design, and was asked also to give some comments, some feedback on that. And so they also turned this business site into an area which combines, let's say, a biodiversity habitat options with experience and a nice aesthetical appearance of the business site. Well, so yeah, you see some of the examples in the Netherlands, and perhaps, I don't know, I have some ideas of other European countries, but you could perhaps think, well, there's a lot that we can do, and we are already doing something. But is this ambitious? Is this something that that is really pioneering, is really new from a global perspective? And then during my PhD, I had the opportunity to have a look to what on other locations in the world was going on in this field. And I figured out that in Japan, there is a much longer history in connecting wildlife with industrial areas. And so this is the Sony forest, which is part of the Sony production location. And here you can see that they have a whole kind of, you could say, kind of roadmap where they work. And let's see that it already started in the 1970s, how to link, how to create wildlife habitat at the properties of the companies themselves. So they really do this. They have a really policy in promoting wildlife, promoting biodiversity conservation there, together with their employees, together with other companies. And so you can see also, you can see it on the left, assist other companies in promoting wildlife. So it's interesting to see how this is totally different, and also on another level than what we are used to in the Netherlands. And even at more office locations, they have some people envision what wildlife could do there, and they made it a reality. And here you can see from Toyota, their forest, which is part of their company site. And also how they not only link with their employees, but also with the families of their employees. And so it's, I think, on a spiritual, on a different level than we have in Europe. But it's interesting to see, and also to make it a kind of ceremony, and to involve managers and others in promoting the greening of the business side. So that's interesting to see. It's a different culture than in Europe, but it is possible. So it's not only theory, it's not only some analysis looking for potential, but it's already practiced in other parts of the world. And here you see that they also try to bring this knowledge to the departments of those companies in, for example, in Europe, where they say, if this is the location, we want to transform it in a much more biodiverse location. So we have this policy that they give to the locations outside Japan and outside Asia, or for example, in the United States and in Europe. And talking about the United States, the United States have a different perspective, a little bit different. They have this organization which is called the Wildlife Habitat Council, which is there to support larger companies, which often have quite a lot of land, how to support wildlife. And they are there also, I think, since 1980s, also for several decades. And there was already a study some years ago that they figured out that it's important because doing that, because it improved the employee morale. People are really attached to their company if they work on biodiversity conservation, but also on the community relations with the public authorities and the regulators. And they also said something about annual savings, but cost saving, but I do not use that type of knowledge, because then we talk about cost efficiency, and I think that's not a good starting point to talk about, talking about biodiversity conservation at business sites. So you see that all kind of businesses, often the larger players, they have become part of that program, and now this Wildlife Habitat Council work together with them. And quite recently, I got in touch with them during my PhD, but also about a year ago. And now they also, in terms of climate adaptation, are looking for ways to combine biodiversity conservation with climate adaptation. And together with a colleague of mine, we supported the Wildlife Habitat Council how to make this happen, and what is what would be the right guidelines to ensure that the urban greening of the business sites is also promoting both biodiversity as well as climate adaptation. So coming to an end of my talk, we try to figure out how to upscale this knowledge, and we did so in a project a couple of years ago in a collaboration between Vlaanderen and Nederland. It's called the To Be Connect project. You can see it in the upper left corner, where we collaborated with several governments and business sites, and it was, I think, a nice way to explore opportunities to upscale biodiversity conservation at business sites, and with all kinds of locations and all kinds of ways to promote this knowledge. Also developing specific tools to make cost calculations on what greening of a business site could be like. So this is some work from a couple of years ago. Recently, about half a year ago, there is a new project started. It's called, I put it in English, Working Landscapes of the Future. It's a 5-year project which will start after this summer, and it's with a large consortium with many different type of players. So the ministries, the network organization for entrepreneurs. So the companies are the development and construction companies, the landscaping firms, the engineering consultancies, the academic, Wageningen is one of them, but also the Technology University of Delft and the Free University of Amsterdam, and also the education, the practical and the higher education on urban green. And together with them, we'll start to develop more knowledge on how to make this transition into more biodiverse, healthy, and climate adaptive business sites. And you can see already some locations that asked if they could become part of this project. We will look into the missing knowledge in terms of health and well-being, climate, biodiversity, but also the link with the energy transition and with the housing building task. We will do that in living labs, testing nature-based solutions and conducting some empirical research there. Developing tools together also with the stakeholders in terms of labeling of business sites, and whether they have all the right sustainability options, but also cost-benefit analysis and handbooks. The education organization will also include the knowledge in their education programs, and also professors hopefully will also be linked with this project, which is some already have some interest in this large project, and hopefully this will result in different policies in terms of how to renovate current pesticides and also come up with new kind of building codes for new business sites. So that's my talk. And we will bring this with the project. We want to bring it from a couple of sites already quite green and biodiverse currently in the Netherlands to 1,000 business sites, like Helga already said, and we hope to get this transition working in the next years. So thank you for your attention, and yeah, looking forward to see your questions.
Thank you, Robert, for this very interesting talk, and congratulations to this new project that's in front of you.
Yeah.
So we have a few first questions already in the chat. So
yeah.
I would go through them, and if anybody has a question too, you can raise your hand or you can write it down. So
yes. I can see them myself also at the chat, but you can also.
I will read them, or I ask Susanne Knospe, please ask your questions.
Hi, hello to everyone. Thank you very much for your interesting talk. I would like to understand the habitat backbone concept a little better. Who owns these areas in between what you call like parcels? Because human beings and also businesses like to use every area, this space, just putting things down, and then you would destroy some habitats. How can you make sure that they are not used, that they stay biodiverse?
Yeah. So it's part of the port area. So if you look to the port of Antwerp, this is part of the overall layout of the port area. So this could be road verges where there are all kinds of below soil pipelines, for example. It could also be utility areas. So it's a functional part of the port area. So it's not developed for the Naturtech toad. It was already there, but it was managed and not for Naturtech toad purposes. So it was managed like a lawn, so it's also part of, let's say, the business case of the port area. So the different companies, I suppose, they will pay some fee because this whole area should be managed. And the only thing is what we did is that they get into trouble in terms of those protected wildlife there. And we say, okay, if you put it only on the parcels, you get in trouble with those companies and this European legislation all the time. And so ensure that, make a better use of those more public or common areas for wildlife purposes. So you don't get into trouble anymore at the parcel level. Yes, it's clear.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. And you had another question. You could ask them.
Yes, when I saw the Heineken business area, my first thought was rooftop greening, but you did not suggest that. But we know they in Freiburg. I'm from the city of Freiburg, city planning department, and we love our green rooftops because they're very biodiverse.
Yes, and I know that in certain countries there has been a much better green roof policy. So I know, for example, in Switzerland, it's an obligation if you have a flat roof. In the Netherlands, we are not yet there. So we have many flat roofs which are not cannot be used for green roofs because they are too light. And so they are constructed 10, 20, 30 years ago, and you cannot put something on top of it. Of course, we look to green roofs, and we also try to figure out how to combine, let's say, the climate adaptation functionality of a green roof with the biodiversity conservation potential. And we do this in other projects, and we use this knowledge to step forward to companies if they have this opportunity. In the case of the Heineken brewery, it was not possible there. So, and they had, and I think that's more the exception, that they had quite some land there which was already green, which we can transform. But of course, green roofs as well as green walls are in the picture in terms of both climate as well as biodiversity conservation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thomas Jung, would you like to ask your question yourself?
Yes. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Robert, for the really inspiring talk. I just wanted to I think you already addressed this a bit in your presentation, but I just wanted to know a bit more about the convincing process, when you convince business to actually implement these designs of reconciliation ecology, because definitely we're not relying on solely the goodwill of these businesses to implement these technologies. So how does the process, how does the process carry out, I guess?
Yeah. So it's I think I learned the hard way. And so I had some talks for entrepreneurs that looked to me and said, "Hey, what are you doing here? So it's not interesting what you're saying." And so and then because what can we do with it? So I learned to really figure out what is their perspective, and what you often, and also in the To Be Connect project, we also try to promote that type of knowledge, let's say, with other people who get in touch with companies, try to figure out company owners and people from companies, they really like to talk about their company and ask them about their company and ask them questions that where you can make a link with the opportunities for example, wildlife habitat development, but do not propose it in the first place, but just ask them what they think is important for them. And that there are all kinds of different motives depending on the location, on the type of company, on the person that you're talking with. But sometimes it took more than half an hour before the other person, the company person, which I was talking about, asked me, by the way, who are you and what are you doing? And then I told them that I'm an ecologist, and they say, okay, I had no clue about it, because I start to talk, let's say, business language with them about what is their company, what are they doing. And this really, if you try to stay close to what their energy is on, it's the best way to ensure that there will be some support for the ideas. So if they say, we like our reputation, or we like our employees to be more healthy, or they can have all kinds of motives. Yeah, come up with an idea which is directly linked with their motives. And for example, with the Heineken brewery, I told the managers, the CEOs of the Heineken, I told them what their competitors in the world are doing on biodiversity. I just showed them. And then I said, but none of your competitors is doing something with biodiversity at the brewery currently. So you could be the first. And CEOs really like to be the first. And so that's a way of ensuring that there can be some support. And then if I also can say that, let's say, financially wise, it's not that expensive. And you really help, let's say, the narrative ensures that there is an opportunity that they come into action. Not always. Of course, I also, let's say, I don't know whether I failed, but at least not all my suggestions became reality. But I figured out that yeah, don't be a missionarist. Don't be somebody telling that wildlife is going bad and you want them to help it. They're not interested in that. So, but if you can tell them that the employees could be more healthy, or that they can make their reputation can increase by doing something for the community in terms of, and that will help.
Oh,
thank you.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it will be interesting when you start the scaling up to find unique points for each company.
Yeah. Yes. And so we will also, let's say, for the people who really talk with the companies themselves, they need, let's say, not perhaps instructions, but at least a good amount of knowledge on this, and so this is, let's say, the narrative. But we are now also trying to put on the cost-benefit analysis, showing them, like we did, for example, for inner green, and so the interior green, we show the business case. We show them what are the costs of some plants in your office and what are the benefits, and see how your production of your employees goes up, and that within a couple of months or sometimes weeks, you already are making money out of putting green in your office. And the same way we also like to do it with the exterior green.
Thank you. Alexandra Ditch, you also have a question.
Yes, hello, Robert. Thank you so much for your talk. I was thinking when you talked about the pets, especially, but also other animals who have, we know that wildlife is easily disturbed and very much influenced by light. And these lights on the business parks and industrial parks, they are so evidently there. How do you manage to keep it dark or to get it dark?
Yeah. And so at Wageningen University, the colleagues at the university, they did also long-term research on artificial light and the impact on wildlife. So I'm quite aware about that. I think that what we call the energy transition is helping a little bit in terms of at least addressing the energy issue. And of course, the LED lighting is already doing something there, but so it's what we try to do is, and that's what we do with what we call nature inclusive building. We try to place people in the position of the species themselves. Mm-hmm. So show how an animal or a plant will utilize the environment, and so that they, for example, we do this with landscape architects, but also with urban developers. We tell them what species need, and from there on, of course, we already know quite good what humans need. We try to where we can combine it, and I think there's a lot of work to do, and so it's not. But at the moment, you can tell them that especially. So we know also from other projects that there are specific zones that are dark, to promote, for example, the bats and some of the nocturnal insects and things like that, and that it's part of an official strategy instead of it's an accident and we have to put some extra lights there. Yeah, it can help, but it also will take time. We have the idea that we have to have light everywhere. Yeah. But yeah, at least we're trying to address it, and we also know that some typical colors are less impactful, but by far the best is no light at all. Yeah. Or at least not put a light, for example, to the upper part of the tree where the bats are flying, but just directed to the ground, and so try to mitigate the impact as much as you can do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This leads me to another question, maintenance. So these areas, how good they are, often it depends on the maintenance during the next summer, the next 2 summers. Do you give these companies also plans for maintenance, and how can you make them aware that this is so important?
Yes, yeah. So if we talk about wildlife, the first thing is that you have sufficient space for wildlife. So if there's no space, it stops immediately. But at the moment you put in some area there which is will be used by wildlife, and you put in certain vegetation, of course the maintenance is very important. And in the working landscapes of the future project, we work together also with the umbrella organization for landscaping firms. So we ensure that this type of knowledge is also there, but also we discuss it with the entrepreneurs and also with what we call the park managers. So these are the companies that do a lot of the maintenance of the overall business side, so including the waste and all the other things and security. And they, some of them already are doing this, but it's still quite a pioneering reality at the moment. Sometimes it's about cost, and often, let's say, more ecological management of urban green is is not much more expensive, depending a little bit on the situation, but it's often about awareness. Know that if you have the wrong maintenance, landscaping maintenance, it doesn't work. And that's also what I'm telling the companies. Ensure that you have a landscaping firm that knows what they're doing in terms of biodiversity, because else you don't get your goals. So, but still, there's lots of work to do.
Thank you so much. Anne-Lois, you have a question. You want to ask it? She was asking, when do you implement the Milieueffekten reportage? Before the planning of?
Well, I think these, so this is reporting on the environmental impact. This is often, if we talk about a certain size of a development, the most of the work that I'm involved in doesn't meet those minimum size. So often it's on the environmental impact assessments are not not relevant in these cases. It could be if we will work on towards 1,000 business site that we get in touch with it as well. But these days, most things that I propose to companies and municipalities or provinces are not. There's no impact assessment needed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dorothy Huber.
Yes, hello. Thank you for your interesting talk. I'm Dorothy Huber. I'm from the Technical University of Vienna, from the Department of Urbanism. And we're also focusing in our department a lot on the topic of productive city. And I have the question before was how you convince business owners to change their sites. But I would think there are always push and pull factors. So on one hand, you pull them, you try to convince them, but there's also a kind of pushing. So my question is, are there also some processes going on about changing this biodiversity topping in business sites by law? For example, from the EU, there's now this EU taxonomy, how they're kind of forcing them to change to sustainable energies. But is there something going on into if there are urban regulations, if you build a new business site, you have to consider this?
Yes. As far as I know, in the Netherlands at least, not specifically for business sites, but much more for urban areas in general. So there's this European law also in preparation about the amount of urban green in cities. This will end up also, if it's agreed upon, end up also at the business site area. And then there's also, in terms of nature inclusive building, there will be obligations implemented in national legislation in the Netherlands to ensure that new buildings are much more nature inclusive than they are right now. So one thing, and then perhaps there's also, and this is something that we will explore in this new project, there's also some policies that the provinces that have a big say in new business site developments, and also in this renovation of existing ones. Try to figure out if we can develop new types of policies which include biodiversity, but also climate adaptation and health. So we are moving in that direction, and it's always the story of the stick and the carrot. And the stick, the legislation will definitely work to ensure that the larger amount of sites will come into action. On the other hand, personally, I'm more from the carrot. I like to work with the front runners and try to make them make one step extra and show what can be reality. And from there on, you can see that there are early adapters that want to do that as well. And often you see that legislation is coming behind. But it's so I also think that that by having this front runner practices, we're making the support for legislation. We're showing that.
Yes,
And yeah, ideally it should be a nice combination. It should be well thought also on the long run. In reality, we'll have to figure out how it works. So, but there's some legislation in the Netherlands that's going into this direction. How it will end up and how exactly it will work out, we don't know yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Helga, I guess your question went in the same direction.
You told that in the Netherlands there is no obligation for greening housing roofs in new buildings. Not yet. This is the case in many German, Austrian, and Swiss cities. Years ago, I read about a cipher of 300 cities in Germany who have an obligation of green roofs already. Do you know if there in Europe are cities with an obligation also for business parks, new building business parks?
I know there is a European, of at least there used to be a European platform on biodiversity and business sides and business. And so this is where, let's say, on a European level, the European Commission and larger businesses talked about what can we do for biodiversity, which is not directly a green roof or green wall, but at least I have not, but I'm perhaps I'm not, I'm outdated, I don't know, but I don't think we have such at the European level. I don't think also we have this in other parts of the world. And it's also, of course, we want to, we have this battle for talent, for example, in Eindhoven, the city in the south of the Netherlands, where we have a high-tech industry. Yeah, we on the one hand, we will try to support them, but we really need more technical people here. And if you have all kinds of restrictions for new buildings, that perhaps, and so what we see here is that those companies themselves get the idea that the urban green is helping them, and now they get to start their parcels. So it would be great if they have there would be some legislation, but I think in terms of competing economies, that it perhaps will take some time. In the Netherlands, we have, in terms of climate adaptation, we have stricter rules in terms of water retention at the site, and that means often that green roofs are now becoming more standard. But still, it's not obliged, as far as I know, that every flat roof should be a green roof. And perhaps we go into the direction of the German-speaking countries, but we'll see. Yeah.
Problem is the lack of time. The development is so.
I know. Yeah. Yes. And so we work together with the national platforms for urban development, and also making them more aware and helping them. What is their business case for making buildings more nature inclusive and more green? So we try to do so, but yeah, legislation could help at least. Yeah, I know.
And what about vertical green? This can be very, very cheap and effective as well. For instance, by what is Parthenocissus tricus pedata Wildewijn. The outside of these buildings on business very often do not have any windows, and so it easily could be covered by a very soft self-climbing.
Yeah, well, self-climbing they often don't like, because then, but you could. What we see is that the logistic industry with their larger, let's say what we call the boxes in the landscape, they are aware of that the societal support is decreasing for more of those boxes. So they are looking for ways to make it less boxy, but also to make it more acceptable by society. And we are now also collaborating with in the area of Amsterdam with a new development with, again, some of the boxes, but then they will be covered with plants. And so, and also with nesting opportunities for wildlife. So it really become a kind of a second or third type of landscape, the whole wall. And whether that will be the new standard for all those boxes, we don't know. But at least there we will explore new ways of dealing with seeing more opportunities for wildlife in places that were not yet explored. So I hope that we get into that. On the other hand, it's still a wall, and it cannot replace a whole biotop area. So this is also some discussion. Yeah.
Thank you. Claudia Gold, you have a question.
Yes, thank you very much for this impressive presentation, which really opens my mind for this kind of biodiversity question. Do you know any German university institute that is busy with the same questions as you try to answer?
I worked together with Technical University of Munich with Wolfgang Weiser in nature inclusive buildings. Mm-hmm. So he's animal aided design. He also published on that, and so that this is not specifically focused on business sites, but at least on making buildings more nature inclusive. I used to be in Germany quite some time, but my German is not that I can have this talk in German, unfortunately. But there are some companies in the Bayern region that are already doing something with biodiversity. I know of that, but and the last time I was in Germany some years ago, but I am not aware of a similar research partner at the moment. No. So
because I think it's very interesting. I travel a lot in the Netherlands, and these business sites, they look so unnatural. They look unnatural in Germany as well. Yeah. But to focus with these business sites on biodiversity and to bring back pollinators or wildlife, I think this is really a very good narrative for these sites. And even if these sites are so close to forests, when you say 1/6 is very close to natural sites, this is it's just natural to think like this. But until now, it was not in my mind. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, what when I started my PhD, and the whole idea of a PhD is that you can dig into issues that normally you don't have time to do so. The Ministry of Economic Affairs had a map of the business sites, and the Ministry of Nature Conservation and a map of the natural areas, and they never put that together. So that's what I did. And so I call it that we have a kind of planning tradition in the Netherlands where we don't mix up functions, and we put the housing and the industrial area and the mobility and the nature and agriculture, we put it all apart from each other. And by doing, and these days our country becomes quite crowded, and we cannot afford to do that. So we have to look for opportunities to combine and to make more use of the same square meters. But it's in our heads. And so when I look to I was in Japan, and I also was in the United States. When you see those practices, they can do it. Why can they do it? And we should do it. We can do it also. It's only because we haven't thought about it. And yeah, and I hope to at least simulate a little bit this movement in that direction. And I'm very pleased with the new project, which is a really upscaling project in the Netherlands, but it would be great to do this also in other parts of Europe. Yeah.
I remember I met Robert for the first time, I guess it was 25 years ago, and he already came with this idea. And at this time, as Claudian just told, for the first time at this moment, I got aware that the industrial areas are so huge around all the cities, and also the expansion of cities. It's for a great deal. It's a question of industrial use of the surrounding areas of cities.
Yeah, yes, they were placed there, so I can talk a little bit more about this topic. But when I also digged into the history of business side, then in the beginning they were part of the center of the city. But then they had so much pollution, and that they were put aside. They were put on the border of the city, and then this came of, yeah, the whole concept of a business site was developed. And these days they act as a kind of barrier between the city and the rural outskirts. So they not only for wildlife but also for recreational and other purposes. So yeah, we have to get rid of the barrier and see it as a stepping stone. And that's yeah, I hope that this idea gets accepted more and more, and also we have a different way of working these days after COVID, and we really like the working places to be a nice place to go there. Why not do work at home? So it should have a certain quality. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So thank you.
Questions or?
Yeah, one last question is possible. No, it's good. So I say thank you very much, Robert, for being with us and making this lecture and answering all the questions. Thank you so much. And I want to give you a short view of what is coming next year. We have on the 23rd, Anjali Brandner is talking about the eatable city on an example in Vienna. She's doing her PhD on this topic. And on the 30th of May, we have Sebastian Hafner and Mr. Rom, who they are talking about regenerative city planning, city building, Klimareparatur durch regenerativen Städtebau. And in mid of June, 13th of June, Benedikt Hegel from the Umweltanwaltschaft Wien will talk about birds' death, how to prevent it. So thank you very much. We will put the talk on our YouTube channel in a few days, so you can have a look at it. And I wish you a great evening. Enjoy the evening. Goodbye.
Thank you.